So it is my great pleasure to welcome everyone to our third CoM session today, and it's entitled Strengthening African Cities, Adaptation Finance, Agenda for COP27. My name is Kate Strawn, and I'm the CoM Secretariat and Technical Help Desk Coordinator, which is hosted by ICLI Africa in Cape Town. Firstly, just a few housekeeping. There is live interpretation in English, French, and Portuguese, so please feel free to grab a headset if you need one. The Covenant of Mayors in Sub-Saharan Africa is a European Union action that supports the external dimension of the European Green Deal. At the same time, CoMSA moves to strengthen the African-EU partnership and supports Agenda 2063 of the African Union Commission. CoMSA is co-funded by the EU, ENZ, and ACID, and we thank our funders for making today possible, as well as GIZ Expertise Grants and AFD for partnering with us and further making these sessions possible. Today's session will bring together city stakeholders as well as financiers to discuss financing opportunities that are now available to cities post-COP26, discuss the challenges faced by small, medium cities in accessing finance, discuss ways in which these challenges could be solved in the lead up to COP27, identify actions and recommendations that we need to take forward. Climate finance continues to be dominated by support for mitigation over adaptation, and recent climate finance statistics show how only 20 to 25% of all committed concessional climate finance from developed to developing countries is dedicated to adaptation. This is particularly concerning for African cities, which face some of the most devastating effects of climate change, despite our contributing minimally to the global carbon emissions. At COP26, new records in resource mobilization for adaptation funds were reached, and a 2-year work program on the global goal for adaptation was launched. African cities, however, still continue to face major technical and institutional capacity constraints in accessing climate finance. Therefore, today, we'd like to chat to a number of financiers as well as cities to unpack the challenges as well as the opportunities that our cities have. Without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speakers, and I'm going to introduce the 2 speakers who are missing, and hopefully they will also arrive. It is, I'm going to introduce, here's one of our speakers. So while Dr. Emmanuel Araggio, the mayor of Climat, makes a grand entrance here, I'll take the opportunity to introduce you first. So Dr. Araggio is the mayor of Climat City Council in Mozambique and has extensive experience in civil society, academia, business, and politics. He's also the vice chair for ICLI Africa's regional executive committee, and he also sits on the General Executive Committee for ICLI globally. He is a member of the CoMSA Regional Mayors Forum, and Dr. Araggio also is currently a senior lecturer at the Faculty of Political and Social Science of the Catholic University of Mozambique. Engineer Solomon Noy, who is on my far left, is currently the Director of Waste Management Department for the Accra Metropolitan Assembly, with over 20 years of working experience in public service. Mr. Noy is a sanitation expert with experience in municipal water infrastructure and solid waste management. Our last speaker, who hopefully will join in a few minutes, is Dr. Amis, and he is the founder and executive director of the African Center for a Green Economy, which is a non-profit think tank and capacity building organization based in South Africa. Dr. Amis has extensive experience on the green growth and well-being issues in Africa and regularly consults on the same for development agencies government and private sector across Africa. And hopefully he will join us in a few minutes. But and then we've also got Samuel Lefray, who's a senior task team leader at the Urban Management Unit in the Agency Française de Development, did you say that wrong, AFD, and he's currently the lead coordinator for the Secretariat project, which is a preparation facility and which is co-financed by the European Union, CECO and AFD to support African cities. His expertise includes the setup, engineering and financing of urban infrastructure and local development projects in developing countries. So, I'm going to get started and pose my first question for our mayor here, Mayor Raggio. And Mayor, I have two questions for you today. And the first one is, what is the number one constraint your city is facing in accessing climate finance, particularly for adaptation? And secondly, many African cities have great project ideas, but struggle to further these to concept and feasibility stages. What is needed for cities to be able to move down the financing process? And what can be done to support this from other entities as well as national government?
Well, thank you very much for having me here at this panel. Let me also thank my good friend Samuel Lefebvre and Mr. Solomon. It's really a great pleasure for me to be here to share the challenges that we are facing in the global south to access finance. And I'm very happy that we have someone here from AFD, because I may recall, I think it may have been 7 or 8 years that I visited the headquarters of FAD in the hope that we will manage to unlock some funding from them. But it's now 8 years have gone and nothing, I must report, there's nothing moved. So that's one of the biggest difficulties. But going to the first question, what are the challenges that the global south and in fact the city of Climat face? I must say that first of all, probably it is what I would call lack of qualified people to produce what they say in the banking parole, bankable projects. There is that word called bankable projects, which we coming from the civil service, from the NGO sector, are not quite aware or don't have the skills to need to match the expectations from the banking sector. So to me, what I identify as the major challenge that we face is the lacking of understanding from each side. I don't want just to put the blame on the local governments or NGOs or the civil sector, but I put on equal foot on both sides. And I think that climate change is something that worries all of us, not only we in the local government, but also those in the financial sector. So we, all of us, should be moving in the same direction to understand the other side of the equation. I mean, in economics, normally we say, well, you have demand side, and then you have the supply side. In this case, those on the financial side, I would say, but they're the ones who are supplying the money. We are the ones who are looking for the money. So what I understand is that we don't have the same language, we don't have the same framework, and sometimes I think we have actually, what I will say, opposing objectives, at least in the short, medium, and in the long term. So what I think is important that we need to do is to come up with strategy and platform to educate each other. We, from the local government and from the government side, need to educate the banking sector about our assets. Because we as local government, we have got assets. We have things that we could use as either as collateral or as instruments that would allow the financial sector to give value to those assets that will then allow us to assess the finance. On the other side, we need also to educate local government to understand the minimum requirements of the financial sector. Because normally those in finance, they need a project that will convince them that whatever you spend will somehow come back in one way or the other. I think that's where we are lacking this bridge. Because for us, in the government sector, we spend. We see needs, we see problems, and we think that by allocating resources, be financial or human, we solve them. While those on the supply side, they want justifications, they want numbers, they want justifiable explanations for where the money went to, and how are they either getting back, or how are we going to find a kind of an equilibrium? Because most of the times in the finance, you cannot spend more than what you produce. So that's it. For them, it's like a law. You need to equalize somehow. Whatever you spend, somehow you need to find a way to bring in as income, either before you spend it or after you have spent it. And there are two ways for local governments to fund themselves. One is through internal revenues or income, be it from taxes, be it from other sources. But also there are transfers from regional or central government, depending on the legal framework in each country. There are countries which are more liberal, legal-wise speaking. For example, I recall last time I was having a conversation with the former mayor of Dakar. His dream was to have a city bond. That was his real dream. He said, look, the only way I can solve the lack of funding will be to go the road of city bonds. And he was trying to emulate the Johannesburg mayor who had already city bonds. But apparently he did not succeed on that, because then, I'm not from Senegal, but apparently trying to issue city bonds were perceived by central government as a threat to whatever was happening in this country at that time. Sorry, I'm not from here. I'm saying what I have learned. If I'm wrong, please feel free to correct me so that I believe it is the right thing. So I'm trying to say that there are challenges when we try to find ways to fund cities, be it via bonds, be it looking for other sources. The third way of funding is, of course, the international, what I would call international market. It can be the NGO market, it can be concessional funds, or funds from banks. Each of them have got its own requirements. And most of us in the local government, we are not prepared. We don't have the qualified people to understand and to answer the requirements that these two institutions want, to even consider a proposal. So again, I will start where I started from. I will finish where I started from. The importance of understanding each other, of educating each other, of training each other in the languages and the requirements of the other side. To me, it's of paramount importance if we want to move in the same direction. Furthermore, with the issue of the COVID pandemic, this challenge became even more relevant, because cities became more vulnerable, not only from climate change, but also now from pandemics. And these pandemics, for most cities, don't have also qualified people, don't have the resources, and so on. I don't know if I've answered the first question, or if you want to dig more about the same question or about the second question.
No, that's great. We can always come back just now. I think there's going to be a lot of questions also on the floor. So my next question is for Engineer Inouye. And what upcoming climate change plans and projects does Accra Metropolitan Assembly have? And what are some of the challenges in mobilizing finance for these projects that you currently face? And then my second question for you is, Beyond any climate resilience objective, the goal of adaptation initiatives should always be to improve the overall functioning of a city. What are some of the examples of how Accra has done this?
Okay, thank you very much, and greetings from the city of Accra and from our current mayor, Honorable Elizabeth Saki. Yes, so currently in Accra, we are in the forefront and we are tackling climate change head on. But there are a lot of issues as regarding climate adaptation finance. And there is no doubt that we need external support and capacity in order to build the needed resilience in order to be able to cope with the ecosystems which are sustaining us. However, the current financing mechanisms and architecture or design of the climate adaptation finance schemes are very much shrouded in some complexity and are not accessible to city governments all over sub-Saharan Africa. This has forced most of our city governments to use their meager resources from public financing such as taxes and levies to be financing major infrastructure projects and programs that are targeted towards climate change, adaptation and mitigation measures. The city of Accra is not left in this. We are constantly being faced with climate change impacts such as coastal erosion, which our city governments will always find resources to build sea defenses and what have you in order to protect the citizens. Permit me to say that issues of climate change are very dire and we must not in any way relax in our efforts to deal with it. We need the needed infrastructure to be able to get the needed adaptation mechanisms that we need. And here I'm talking based on my background. What do I mean? For instance, two main issues come to play when we talk about climate adaptation. Let's take one, which is drought. In times of water scarcity and no rainfall, we all know that Africa, and for that matter sub-Saharan Africa, rely on rain-fed agriculture. Without the rains, we are not getting our crops. So, what do? This is where CoMSA comes to play and plays a very important role in getting expertise to synergize in order that we all, as African cities, plan towards efficiency in this regard. We know from science, and for that matter, climate science or climatology, that for rain to happen or for rain to fall, three conditions must be met, and these three are key. One is what we call condensation nuclei, the particles that we emit, whose weights are so tiny that they can spread all over in the atmosphere. Number two is water vapor, which is through evapotranspiration from plants and the water bodies that evaporate water vapor into the atmosphere. And three is the right or adequate temperature. By the grace of God, we are blessed with an average of 12 hours of sunlight and 12 hours of moonlight in Africa. This is where we have to let our young ones go into science, study engineering science, climatic science, and all that have you, in order to bring these three conditions, force them by way of adaptation through engineering, and create the needed microclimate that we need, so that instead of subsistent small farming, the areas where we have the big lands for arable farming, in times of scarcity and drought, we can engineer this rainfall based on science. How do we compare this to allowing the situation like that, and in times of prolonged drought, we'll be dependent on genetically modified foods, which seeds cannot be replanted by our farmers. And for that matter, most of the crops or local plants are indigenous and peculiar to certain communities within our societies. These GMOs cannot bring them back. And with time, if we sit down aloof, such important plants will go extinct. Another impact is flooding. Due to climate change, there are times where we have excessive rainfall. Instead of allowing this rain, water, as we know, is a fugitive. If you leave water, it will flow from a height of higher ground to a lower ground. And what do I mean? If we do nothing about this, the water, excessive water will flow all the way into the sea, the oceans. What we need to do is to get adequate financial resources, to get the needed infrastructure, that is getting underground tunnels or channels through geomatic engineering and geological engineering, everybody coming on deck. Then we redirect this water through underground tunnels into detention ponds or dams, which will relieve the citizens of the flooding into their homes, but retain the excessive water which can be used in irrigation farms and even hydroelectric dams. Once again, how do we compare this to doing nothing about the situation and rather relying on desalination plants by allowing the water to go into the sea? And it is so expensive, and at the end of the day, we do not have the capacity to manufacture the memories that are needed to sustain or run or operate a desalination plant. And with time, what will happen is there will be water scarcity, and we will be importing water. No matter what we do, as we chase and crave for the sophisticated lifestyle, let us know that there is no substitute for water anywhere in the world. No substitute. So when the water runs dry, we are in this together. Because if we do not have water, our very existence as human beings will come to an end. And so, of what benefit will it be to have the state-of-the-art infrastructure, buildings, mansions, machinery, and you have no water to drink, no water to sustain life? And this is what we mean by adequate financing mechanisms to get the infrastructure to be able to hold the little that we have in place, rather than allowing them to go. And these are practical adaptation issues that I'm sharing with us all, that we need to put into place. For Accra, we are doing a lot. Currently, we are into, apart from adaptation mechanisms, we are also into mitigation measures, where we want to, by the help of CoM SSA and other agencies, we are getting the brief feasibilities and feasibility studies to be done in order that we will tap into our waste management situation and then go into waste to energy, where we will not rely on the vegetation by cutting down trees for firewood, but by relying on our waste management, which is the organic fraction of the waste, to be able to get the needed domestic energy in terms of biomethane to support domestic cooking. So the few I want to share with you for now are the challenges when it comes to climate adaptation finance. And I'm happy AFB is here as to what needs to be done is for them to tell us. In last year, COP 2026, we had bold decisions and bold commitments that were made. But as we speak, I am yet to find out if even 3% or 2% of those financial commitments have been released to city governments. Yes, it is true that financial institutions like them will want to use the central governments as the gatekeepers, and so for that matter, they will always rely on the central government. But the action spot is at the city or municipal level, and it is an aggregation of what cities are doing in their own small corners or their own small ways that will aggregate to make the needed impact that we need in climate change mitigation and adaptation measures. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Commissioner. I think both our city officials here have touched on an important point, and that is bridging the gap. I think this is something that we see as a challenge in many, many cities. A lot of our cities are sitting with policies and plans which have a number of activities listed in these policies and plans, but it's how we move from taking those activities and developing them into that project concept that is able to attract climate finance. And how do we bridge that gap between our municipalities and our DFIs so that they're speaking the same language? I think this is a challenge that we often face, because we sit in a room with city officials and our DFIs and we don't speak the same language. So how do we bridge those gaps also? And yeah, another, I think Mayor Rajo touched on a really good point also, and that is looking for innovative funding mechanisms and moving away from our traditional funding mechanisms that so often cities have been able to access. And I think that brings us to a really good point here with Mr. Lefray, and that is how do we move from grant-based funding, which currently plays a really significant role for adaptation-based projects, and yet there is still a significant finance gap. So it would be great if you could touch on this, but also maybe chat a bit about the Secure Fund, the Secure Project, and how that is assisting cities in accessing climate finance.
Thank you very much. Very glad to be here. I think my the two panelists should maybe get the translation, because I'm supposed to speak in English. I was to speak in French. I was prepared to speak in French to this audience, so if you don't mind, to be sure that I answer to your questions. I could switch the English button in my mind, but that may be a bit... okay.
Just give everyone a chance to speak to you.
Je vais parler en français.
Somebody is saying from his mic that you can speak in English. Somebody will translate. So there is translation.
My mind is switched on the French button. I prepared my talking points in French. Yeah, I'll do in French, and I will directly speak to you just afterwards. Merci. Donc, Je représente donc une institution financière internationale bilatérale qui s'appelle l'Agence française de développement et j'ai plusieurs casquettes. Je m'occupe notamment de la facilité CICLIA. CICLIA, c'est villes et climat en Afrique. Et je crois qu'il y a quelques questions qui m'ont été posées par les intervenants avant, et notamment sur l'accès au financement. Moi, ce que je veux dire, c'est que ça fait 15 ans que je fais ce métier, et à l'AFD, je crois qu'on est parmi ceux qui travaillent le plus avec les autorités locales depuis vraiment très très longtemps, et on parle la même langue. Mais pour faire un petit peu de provocation avec mon collègue qui est à ma droite, je vais dire qu'il n'y a pas de problème d'instruments financiers, il n'y a pas de problème de fonds, il n'y a pas de problème de disponibilité de fonds. Il y a des problèmes de bons projets bien portés politiquement et institutionnellement, qui sont inscrits dans des politiques publiques et qui sont transformationnels, qui sont porteurs de forts co-bénéfices en adaptation et en atténuation. Mais pour ça, on travaille ensemble à les préparer, ces projets. Donc voilà, donc je veux retourner un petit peu la question, enfin en tout cas l'intervention, en disant, moi j'ai vraiment l'impression que je n'ai pas beaucoup de demandes de projets qui correspondent peut-être aux critères, vous avez raison, d'une institution financière internationale comme l'AFD, et je crois qu'il faut qu'on réexplique peut-être un petit peu comment on fonctionne. Mais nous, on fonctionne selon les besoins des villes, on est vraiment au contact avec vous, et notre métier, c'est de travailler au quotidien avec vous dans tous les pays d'intervention. Je ne vais pas parler des challenges, des défis aujourd'hui, je voudrais évoquer certaines pistes et certaines solutions qui existent. Et je crois que CICLIA ou les autres facilités de préparation, ce qu'on appelle les facilités d'assistance technique et de préparation de projet, sont une des réponses. Parce que, alors CICLIA, c'est donc Citizen Climate in Africa, c'est une facilité qui est dotée de 12 millions d'euros en subvention. C'est pour, à la demande des villes, à la demande des autorités locales des pays d'Afrique, financer des stratégies, des schémas directeurs, des études de faisabilité de projets qui sont porteurs de co-bénéfices en atténuation et en adaptation. Ça, c'est la condition, parce que c'est vraiment une facilité. Vous demandez de la finance climat, et nous, on cherche à orienter la finance climat. D'accord ? Donc, des projets qui ne sont pas porteurs de forts co-bénéfices en atténuation ou en adaptation vont avoir du mal à être éligibles à ce type de facilité. Je cite CICLIA, mais il y en a d'autres, CoM SSA, il y a plusieurs facilités. Les bailleurs de fonds se sont dotés de beaucoup de facilités de préparation de projets, constatant effectivement qu'il y avait des demandes un petit peu, des besoins identifiés dans les villes, mais pas toujours, des projets complètement préparés et complètement prêts à être financés. Vous avez parlé de projets bancables, moi je dirais de projets arrivés à un stade de maturité suffisant, dérisqués, et ayant des résultats et des impacts pour les populations et pour le climat qui soient clairs et démontrés. Ça, ce sont des éléments de confort pour nous qui sont absolument nécessaires et qui ne manquent pas. Donc, je dirais que si je me rapporte aux éléments du GIEC, je crois que les facilités de préparation de projet qu'on a mis beaucoup de bailleurs en place répondent vraiment aux besoins. Le besoin, c'était indiqué strengthening project pipeline development, pardon, je parle en anglais, and shifting finance from readiness activities to project implementation would help realize transformative adaptation in Africa. Il y a le missing gap qui est au milieu. Il y a des politiques, des schémas sectoriels, il y en a de plus en plus, des documents de planification dans les villes. Et il y a des besoins des populations. Mais il manque des projets structurés, bien ficelés, portés politiquement par les exécutifs locaux et par les coalitions d'acteurs qui ne sont pas que les exécutifs locaux, par aussi souvent les ministères qui sont nécessaires, puisque, comme l'a dit mon collègue à gauche, souvent les villes elles-mêmes ne peuvent pas emprunter de l'argent. Elles n'ont pas l'autonomie financière et fiscale suffisante pour emprunter. Donc un bailleur de fonds peut le faire, peut prêter en direct, l'AFD peut prêter en direct, mais elle passe parfois par le ministère pour rétrocéder les fonds à la collectivité locale. Donc on peut se servir des fois du niveau central comme une porte d'entrée. On a tout un tas de mécanismes qui peuvent permettre de pallier à ce déficit d'autonomie fiscale et financière. Et en tout état de cause, le problème est très donc on est flexible. On peut rentrer par plusieurs portes, toujours avec l'objectif d'appuyer les villes. Mais il manque par contre toujours des études de faisabilité sérieuses. D'abord des études de pré-faisabilité, comme l'a dit monsieur, et des études de faisabilité pour créer des projets avec l'assurance qu'ils aient des résultats et des impacts. Donc, ensuite, quand on a ça, nous, en tant que banque de développement, on passe, vous demandez la question Kate, la question c'est de passer des subventions, des grantes qui sont limitées, on n'a pas des subventions illimitées chez les bailleurs de fonds, pour passer à l'échelle, pour avoir des financements substantiels avec plusieurs dizaines de millions d'euros, voire plus, il faut qu'on utilise l'outil des concessional loans, des prêts bonifiés. Et donc ça, effectivement, l'AFD a ces prêts bonifiés à disposition pour intervenir dans les pays d'Afrique. Et évidemment, il faut qu'on trouve à notre conseil, pour octroyer ces financements, qu'il y a des projets bien préparés, qui sont prêts à être présentés à notre conseil d'administration et qui vont délivrer des résultats et des impacts transformationnels. Donc moi, encore une fois, mon message, il est travaillons ensemble, comme on le fait dans beaucoup de villes, beaucoup de local government, de collectivités locales d'Afrique, à utiliser ces fonds de préparation qui sont en subvention, c'est coût zéro pour les collectivités locales, pour avoir des bureaux d'études, pour monter des démarches participatives, des coalitions d'acteurs qui créent ce momentum, qui créent ces projets qui sont prêts à être financés, ready to finance. Je n'aime pas le terme bancal, c'est ready to be financed. Ensuite, on les présente et ensuite, effectivement, pour financer les investissements, il faut passer au-delà des simples subventions, mais on peut faire des mix pré-subventions. On a la capacité, nous, en tant que banque de développement AFD, de mixer des subventions déléguées par l'Union européenne avec des prêts concessionnels. Et dans ce cas-là, ça fait des packages financiers qui sont extrêmement peu chers pour les États, d'autant plus que les projets qu'ils mettent en place délivrent des résultats et des impacts économiques qui sont importants. Donc voilà, je m'arrête là, j'ai beaucoup d'autres choses à dire, mais je vais à la fois intervenir et à la fois répondre en partie, j'espère, à la question. Il faut trouver des espaces de dialogue pour bien se comprendre sur les prêts mais il y a de l'argent sur la table. Ça, c'est pas un problème. Et il y a de la volonté de travailler avec les collectivités locales, en tout cas de l'Agence française de développement depuis très longtemps. Merci.
Thank you, Sam. I think it's really fascinating to know that energy is moving away from these grants-based to more concessional finance. But also you touched on the point that projects that you're seeing are not bankable yet. And I think this really speaks to the points that Mayor Raju was making, that cities don't have the capacity or the skills to develop these bankable projects that can go to such financiers to access finance. And I think this is a major area that needs a huge amount of focus. And I think leads me to my next question is, if we said that we could stand up at COP27 and recommend a way forward when they make all these announcements of new funding opportunities or finance that's available for Global South cities, what would be some of the recommendations that one would make to all these big VIPs who make all these announcements, and what would we recommend to ensure that maybe finance does flow to our cities? And Mayor Raju, I'll start with you.
Well, thank you very much for the explanation, for tentative explanation. Since I'm speaking now, I wouldn't be much impressed with more money being announced, because Because even from, if we start from the COP in Paris, there were lots of announcements. If you look from the COP in Paris to the last COP in Glasgow, like the amount increased in terms of announcements, global commitments. But if we go to the percentage of that commitment that was indeed implemented or reimbursed, I think I could even risk say that probably it went down or very close to that. So the issue here are not the new announcements that may come to COP, and I think they're already prepared, because I've been dealing with some diplomats and some people involved in the negotiation. They're already moving into that direction. So like the culture is there, okay? The big fish come there, make big announcement, then they go back. I will be more concentrated if we were more committed into identifying these gaps and coming up with concrete plans to solve them. Like one, it was identified here, that cities, and I do agree, don't have even, and I underline the word even, the capacity to produce pre-feasibility studies. So my point is, how much money can be put into this thing, which really is at the cornerstone of the whole lack of progress? Because we as the cities, we know what are the problems. But we cannot transform the problems into projects, even into a pre-feasibility studies. These are like the normal cities from the global south, but then we have even the worst cities, because I have got what I call the hierarchy of languages. It's like if you as a city or if you are in a country where we speak languages, probably just in terms of the access of information about the available funding, you may be at, I would say, 8%. Like you may have information about, I'm not yet talking about the capacity to produce, but information about the available funds. Then if you are like in Senegal, where you speak French, that level will decrease, I will say, to 40%, because the other 60% are only English. So if you don't just speak English, you're out of the equation. What is then to say about countries like mine, where we speak Portuguese? We are excluded from the funds available in English and in French. So like we are even worse off than the other two. What I'm trying to say is that different cities in different places, in different geographies, in the global south, face different kinds of structural challenges in terms of getting funds. What we are talking now is we are trying to generalize, but each region, each country, each city, whatever, we can even deepen. And that's my hope when joining institutions like CoM SSA, ICLEI, or UCGL and so on, is that our voices, our specific voices can be heard there. We as countries which speak English, we have our problems which are general, structural, but then they may have their own particular challenges. Those speaking French, those speaking Portuguese, and so we need, I mean, we can go there with, of course, at a COP, we go to the global message, okay? The common problems that face all of them. But we need to move also from that. After achieving that, we need to bring packages that are tailored to specific contexts and to specific countries. Otherwise, we will always go to these conferences, spend lots of money, spend lots of time talking generalities, but in reality things would not move. As things have not moved from COP25 to now, the COP we are going in Chamasha. And I think that it's a responsibility for the global south, but more important for Africa, because it's now happening in Africa, that our voice is heard, that our problems are tackled, but for that, we need to be clear about what we want. What do we expect? Because if we continue speaking in generality, we will go there and then we will come empty-ended again, as in Glasgow, again, as in Paris. Though I recognize, like I said, it, now the space, the voice of local governments are more loud on one side, but also are more heard, meaning that the UN is opening up more and more. This year, for the first time, 4 of us, as mayors, we had a platform at the General Assembly where we put the main issues, challenges that the Global South was facing. So that was like the first time ever since the UN was created that mayors were given a formal platform to interact with the General Assembly. That's a good move in the right direction. It's not all. We need to be also in the negotiations, because that's where the resources are. Of course, the big statements are very important, but we need to have the capacity to follow up. And I think institutions like CoM SSA, UCA and others can play a very important step in translating the general commitment into pragmatic resolutions and into funding.
Thank you, Mayor Raja. I think, yeah, so if I can sum up quickly, what you recommend is that we, instead of making these oppressive big finance announcements, we rather concentrate on how that finance can be used to fill those gaps, to ensure that we move from ideas to actual project concepts or pre-feasibility studies that then can be used to access these this finance that has been previously announced, and that packages are developed or tailored for countries. And I think those are 2 great recommendations. I'm just going to move along the table now. So, Samuel, I think it would be great to hear from you on, yeah, if you had a platform at COP, what you would like, your recommendations would be.
Okay. To use the project preparation facilities, j'ai pas en français là. Les annonces sont très importantes au COP. C'est un moment politique extrêmement important et comme ça a été dit, la voix des collectivités locales est de plus en plus entendue. L'adaptation au changement climatique, qui est une demande récurrente, est vraiment en haut de l'agenda pour la COP 27. Ça l'était déjà à la COP 26. Je reviens sur l'outil, je ne suis pas monomaniaque, mais je reviens sur l'outil des fonds d'assistance technique et de préparation de projet. Pour passer d'un problème que rencontre une communauté locale, pour passer d'un enjeu local ou d'une initiative, d'une idée de projet, ces fonds de préparation, ce sont vraiment les outils qui permettent de faire ces project concepts, ces concepts de projet, ces études de faisabilité, et de transformer les annonces de financement en des fonds pour les études, des fonds en subvention, et ensuite à déverrouiller les fonds pour l'investissement. Encore une fois qu'on a prouvé qu'un projet était bien monté institutionnellement, s'inscrivait dans une stratégie locale, informée par des analyses de vulnérabilité au changement climatique. Donc il y a la partie assess, il y a la partie policy and plans, il y a la partie préfaisabilité. Quand on a tous les éléments du package qui rassurent le bailleur financier, le bailleur il va trouver des instruments financiers, il va pouvoir débloquer les financements en dons, en prêts concessionnels, en blending d'instruments financiers, en mixage de tous ces instruments, en passant directement sur la collectivité locale ou en passant par l'État pour rétrocéder aux collectivités locales ou en passant par des banques locales, banques nationales de développement. Donc je vais revenir là-dessus parce que je pense que c'est vraiment important. À l'AFD, on croit beaucoup, on fait partie d'un club qui s'appelle IDFC, c'est un acronyme anglais, International Development Finance Club, qui rassemble tous les fonds et toutes les banques de développement nationales des pays du Global South, des banques comme la Development Bank of Southern Africa en Afrique du Sud, des caisses de financement en Tunisie comme la CPSCL, etc., etc. Et les institutions financières bilatérales comme l'AFD ont fait partie de ce même club. Et l'idée, c'est que ces banques nationales elles-mêmes s'intéressent aux collectivités locales. Elles s'intéressent à financer la Banque du Mozambique, comment s'appelle-t-elle déjà? La TEB, je ne sais plus. La Banque de développement public pour le Mozambique s'intéresse à financer les autorités locales au Mozambique. Et pour ça, qu'elle développe de l'expertise, qu'elle développe des outils, des procédures et qu'elle-même ait des fonds d'assistance technique pour aider ses propres collectivités locales avec de l'expertise et avec ensuite des financements à disposition. Donc nous, on croit beaucoup au relais que sont ces banques nationales de développement parce qu'en plus, elles vont pouvoir, si à un moment il y a des capacités d'emprunt des collectivités locales, prêter en monnaie locale, d'accord? Donc ça dérisque, elles prêtent en monnaie locale, elles assument les coûts de préparation et elles peuvent affiner leurs outils au contexte local, au contexte d'autonomie financière et fiscale et à l'expertise qu'elles peuvent mettre à disposition. On peut mettre de l'expertise à disposition des collectivités locales dans ces entités-là pour pouvoir sortir des projets. Donc nous, on croit beaucoup à cette autre solution. Il y a les fonds d'assistance technique portés par les bailleurs, mais il y a aussi tout ce que peuvent faire les banques nationales de développement pour transformer des engagements en réalité sonnantes et très touchantes.
You know, I know that there are some rules, but it touches, if you allow me, moderator, it touches into things that really like, make my blood go flash. And one thing is theory, the other thing is practice. And I think I'm very well placed because I teach economics and regional development, but then what I teach when I go to my office as a mayor, it's like I take everything I put into, but because it's not useful. So I had to change the syllabus of the university because it was just theory. And so sometimes you need to link theory with practice, otherwise it's of no use. And I think we all know by experience, even from the literature, that the most conservative institutions are the financial institutions. It's the banking sector. The governor of Mozambique Bank doesn't talk to me. Well, he talks to me because, but he doesn't talk to me. There is no open door from normally central banks to local governments. They don't think that local governments are part of them. So we need to change the architecture. We need to find other ways, because if we trust central banks, we will never reach the point. That's my first point. I mean, the same happened with IMF or with the World Bank. The World Bank only works with rare exceptions, with central government. And this is the problem of the UN. The chart of the UN says that we, the people, it doesn't say we, the central government. Or it sometimes says the government. It didn't say that when they are saying the government, they only mean central government. If you say government, you mean also local government. But that concept is not there in the UN. From New York to the office in Malabo or in Dakar, whatever. The UN talks to central government, don't talk to local government. And we need to change that. If we don't change that, then and central government has got their own problems. And their problem is power. We are talking about control of power, control over resources. And this is a political struggle. Local governments don't have the capacity in most of the countries to go and demand from central government what they are about. And if you remember when I visited your headquarters 8 years ago, and we were discussing about the legislative framework. Now it passed 8 years, nothing moved. Zero. Nothing changed. And as we say, look, unless you change your legal framework, we cannot borrow any money. And I was stuck. The money was there. They wanted to let us. But my national government We don't have the legal framework that will allow me to get the money that he wanted to give me. And I do that because, you know, I cannot spend all my time knocking the door that doesn't open. So like, you know, we have got really hurdles in this architecture. So we need to change that. Sorry for violating the rule.
No problem at all. But I think Samuel touched on an important point also, and that's accessing these project preparation facilities. I think it's something we have seen increase in the last couple of years, is the number of project preparation facilities that are available to our cities. And I think you touched on something also, is the need for those risk and vulnerability assessments to understand what our climate risks are in our cities, so that our projects are based on science and an understanding that your projects are actually going to address climate change. And I think this is something that we often see in many cities sometimes, is we don't actually always understand our climate risks and vulnerabilities, and therefore our projects may not actually address climate change, which means they often are pushed out of these facilities. So it is really important to have these assessments in place. So your assessments such as your greenhouse gas inventories, your risk and vulnerability assessments, your energy to access assessments, so you can utilize those to develop projects that are based on science and actually address climate impacts. But I'm going to move to Solomon now to provide a few words on what his recommendation would be, and then I'm going to open the floor. So if you have a question that's burning, please, when Solomon's finished, I'll open the floor. So you're welcome to ask for questions.
Yeah, thank you very much. So going to COP27, for me, there is the old saying that if you keep doing the same thing over and over, and you don't move outside the box, you don't expect a different result. We will be moving from COP to COP to COP, but let's not forget that the climate vulnerability is real, and it will catch on fast with fast. The issues are simple, yes. What we need to let the powers that be know is that in addressing climate mitigation and adaptation, it is a form of public good that the city governments must render in order for their citizens to access. So yes, when the big financial giants come in with feasibility, pre-feasibility, it's all geared towards capital expenditure, operational expenditure, making profits. That's the bottom line. But the public good comes in where we are saying that yes, the global north, the Western countries, the industrialized countries, they are churning out the greenhouse gases that are causing the climate to change. And for that matter, we are feeling what? The impacts. So, in getting finance to be able to do something at our end, so that we'll be able to cope with the situation, why should we sub-Saharan African countries also pay for the finance that is needed in order to bring about some form of balance in the equation? For instance, like I was espousing, currently we are way below the bottom when it comes to the sanitation ladder in most African sub-Saharan countries. That is, if you have an engineered landfill as an infrastructure where you dump all your waste, for instance, that's way below that's at the bottom. In EU, landfilling is even banned to some extent. If we need to move up the ladder, where we'll be making use of recycling, reuse, and tapping energy from the waste, making sure that the methane does not accumulate, but the methane will be channeled into processes that will bring about a lesser evil in the form of carbon dioxide, which is lesser in terms of global warming potential. The infrastructure that is needed. Why can't we tap from the excessive profit margins that are being made from industrialization to be able to cushion that, and then we go up. But then if we rely on profitability, then we are never going to get any bankable projects, because there is no way any investor with resource will go into recycling of, say, plastics and break even. You will never break even. It always comes with a form of what? Government subsidy. So this is what we are talking about. The big pledges should be channeled to governments in order to provide these what? Subsidies that must be used in providing the enabling environment for the public good infrastructure that we need in order to turn things around. Because we are in this together. If we don't lift up our game, for instance, through efficient waste management, don't forget, all the uncollected wastes that are left along the shores of African countries are flowing right into the sea. And the ocean bed, as we speak, it is only the light weights that we are seeing the sea always what? Bringing ashore. But those that have higher densities are stockpiling at the ocean bed. When it stays there, it is not a problem for Africa alone. Science, again, will tell you that there are natural phenomena called upwelling of the sea. And when these stockpiles of uncollected waste gets to some level, and there is that natural phenomenon of upwelling, the sea will turn vertically and distribute all this back. There are no boundaries in the sea. It will flow from Atlantic to Mediterranean. So this is the message. I don't know whether I'm speaking some language. I will not be there, but this is what I want we as CoM SSA signatories to carry along whenever there are these. The big announcements will never solve the problem. The practicality of it, making it available and getting that conscious understanding that yes, it is going to subsidize something to be able to provide a public good. That is all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Solomon. Yeah, a great message about subsidies and the need for subsidies for local governments. I'm going to now open up the floor for any questions. Are there any questions from the floor?
Merci beaucoup. Comme j'ai l'habitude malheureusement d'entendre les discours que j'ai entendus tout à l'heure, qu'il y a toujours des fonds, il y a toujours des fonds de facilité, mais malheureusement, ces fonds qu'on considère comme des fonds de facilité ou même de préparation de projets, il faut faire parfois des années et des années pour les avoir. Quand on fait une année de travail en mobilisant au moins 4, 5, une dizaine d'experts pour chercher 500 000 pour préparer un projet, il y a problème. Il y a problème. Et ça, vraiment, moi je pense qu'il faut qu'on dépasse cette situation. Parce que je rappelle ce que Feu Jacques avait dit à Johannesburg en 92. Malheureusement, la terre brûle et on continue de regarder ailleurs. Parce qu'on est dans le discours. Moi j'ai travaillé, on a travaillé, que ce soit les fonds qu'on a promis. Après, je ne sais pas, au Danemark, Nous avons prévu le fonds vert. Le fonds vert qui est dans la salle, qui a pu développer un fonds vert, un projet fonds vert financé. C'est extrêmement difficile. Extrêmement difficile. Et pourtant, certaines choses se donnent des évidences aujourd'hui qu'on n'a plus besoin de démontrer. La vulnérabilité. Je prends le cas du logement que je connais le plus. Est-ce qu'aujourd'hui, les deux crises que nous avons connues, la crise de la COVID-19, nous a démontré qu'il faut adapter nos bâtiments? Ça, c'est évident. Parce que ce qu'il a le plus démontré, ce n'est pas au-delà de la promiscuité qui posait problème quand on a confiné certains peuples. Il y avait même, c'était démontré que, et même les médecins l'ont dit, et ça c'était évident, que puisque c'est un virus que les gens attrapent facilement, il faut être dans un espace suffisamment ventilé. Donc il faut adapter les bâtiments. Le deuxième élément, deuxième crise, c'est la chaleur et les montées des températures. Moi, au Sénégal, on nous dit tout le temps que la météo nous a toujours dit que c'est le mois d'octobre le plus chaud de l'année. Mais moi, j'ai l'impression que ce mois de septembre, je me demande si le mois d'octobre est le plus chaud, c'est-à-dire qu'on est mal barré. Parce qu'il fait déjà, il a fait trop chaud, c'est-à-dire quoi? C'est-à-dire que de plus en plus, on va vivre des épisodes de forte chaleur pendant le plus longtemps possible. Au lieu de vivre un mois de chaleur, peut-être qu'on vivra plus. Et ce que je dis, je ne le démontre, je pense que c'est une évidence pour ce qui concerne ce qu'on a vu à travers le monde cette année, où des pays ont atteint des pics de plus de 50 degrés. Est-ce que ça, vraiment, si aujourd'hui, en de développement de logement, on a besoin de me dire que je vais faire 5 mois, 6 mois, 7 mois pour démontrer la vulnérabilité et les co-bénéfices en termes d'atténuation et de changement climatique. Parce que qu'est-ce qui va se passer? La fausse réponse que nous allons apporter aux montées des températures, c'est la climatisation. Ça, c'est la vraie fausse réponse qu'on va apporter. Et je pense que ça, ce sont des questions qui méritent qu'on y penche. Moi, je pense qu'on n'a plus besoin de continuer à tenir ce discours. Et comme notre collègue de France du Ghana nous l'a dit, monsieur le maire, si on va encore pour nous promettre des milliards, ça ne vaut pas la peine. Je pense qu'on peut s'économiser tous ces efforts-là et chacun dans son coin essayer de faire avancer les choses tel qu'il le peut et avec les moyens dont il dispose. C'est ce que je crois que je me remercie.
Thank you so much. A great statement. I'm going to pass this gentleman next. I didn't see any other hands.
Bonjour. Merci beaucoup pour les interventions. Je vais apporter une petite contribution avant de poser un certain nombre de questions à M. Lefebvre. Je me présente, je m'appelle Moustapha Assad, je suis le président de la commission urbanisme, aménagement du territoire de la commune de Bambilor. La commune de Bambilor est une commune de la zone périphérique, donc dans le département de région de Dakar, qui est actuellement caractérisé par le phénomène de l'étalement urbain. Cela est dû à des raisons anthropiques comme nous le savons, mais la majeure partie de nos problèmes sont issus des projets aussi de l'État, particulièrement à ce que vient de dire M. John, c'est M. John, je pense bien, avec le projet des centres de logement. Comment, moi je veux dire des fois l'État, comment peut-il nous demander de lutter contre les changements climatiques et en même temps créer je veux dire les conditions qui multiplient les gaz à effet de serre. Si vous allez dans la commune de Bambilor, qui subit, je vous dis, l'étalement urbain, qui est dans la zone des Niayes. La zone des Niayes, nous savons tous que c'est une zone à vocation agricole, c'est-à-dire de maraîchage et d'agriculture. Nos parents qui s'occupaient des terres actuellement sont en train de migrer jusqu'à Boro, jusqu'à l'eau pour continuer leur activité économique. Donc, on est agressé, on subit. Et au niveau du conseil municipal de Bambilor, nous avons pas mal de projets pour stopper l'étalement urbain de Dakar. nous pensons, pourquoi pas créer une ceinture verte à partir du village de Gorom, en passant par la forêt classée. Mais il y a de cela quelques mois, nous avons reçu un courrier du programme de modernisation des gestion des déchets qui veut installer une unité de transformation des déchets dans cette même forêt de Meute qui s'étend sur plus de 60 hectares. Alors que nous-mêmes, population, nous prévoyons mobiliser les jeunes et les femmes, pourquoi pas avec la réouverture des forages de Bergeran qui fournissent de l'eau aux populations, de repenser au maraîchage, d'aider ces jeunes et les femmes à revenir occuper les terres parce que n'oubliez pas que la zone de Bambilor approvisionne la ville de Dakar en fruits et légumes. Donc, compte tenu de tout cela, je vais aller directement demander à M. Lefebvre, qui a tantôt parlé de financement. Oui, c'est vrai, on a beau parler de libre administration des collectivités locales. Mais c'est sûr qu'il y a un blocage, et je pense bien que ce blocage est avec l'unicité des caisses de l'État. Le problème de l'unicité des caisses, le problème de la comptabilité pose d'énormes difficultés aux collectivités locales. Oui, la libre administration des collectivités locales. On veut que les collectivités locales, territoriales, autant pour moi, soient administrées librement. Mais nous avons des problèmes de fiscalité. Nous avons des problèmes de recettes qui vont nous permettre de mieux mener nos projets à bon terme. L'autre aspect, vous avez dit que les projets doivent être des projets dérisqués, mais aussi rentables, structurellement bien ficelés, et que c'est collectivités territoriales qui les portent. Et ma question est la suivante. Quels sont les critères d'un projet dérisqué, d'un projet rentable que l'AFD, par exemple, pourrait financer pour assister une collectivité territoriale telle que Bambilor, spécifiquement dans le financement des horticulteurs. Par exemple, la création d'une banque agricole locale. Est-ce qu'on peut accéder, est-ce qu'on peut avoir une banque agricole locale qui va assister nos parents maraîchers qui ne vont pas se fatiguer avec ces taux exorbitants des banques classiques et que la collectivité territoriale va les aider, va les accompagner à financer leurs projets pour ne plus, je vais dire, marchander ou vendre autant pour moi leur surface agricole à des promoteurs immobiliers qui sont là que pour spéculer le foncier. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, sir. And I think that question was posed to Samuel. I don't know if you want to answer it now or try. And then move on. I think we have time for one more question, and it was the gentleman on the corner there. As we have to stop at 4 o'clock. So, and then Samuel asked the question, we're going to take one more short question, and then we're going to wrap up. Then maybe so you'll grab a speaker afterwards.
I think the translator said he would start the translation at 4. Merci. Alors là, on est sur un cas particulier, on est sur un cas que je ne connais pas, le Sénégal, particulièrement votre commune périphérique de Dakar. J'ai quand même le sentiment que ce que vous expliquez, c'est plutôt un sujet de maîtrise de l'étalement urbain, que c'est un sujet de plan d'occupation des sols, de respect du plan d'occupation des sols, et donc plutôt de planification, de stratégie avec Dakar. Et là, il y a des outils aussi. Moi, je parle des facilités de préparation de projet quand on est sur le morceau où il manque de préparer des études de pré-faisabilité, des études de faisabilité, mais d'autres facilités, comme le CoM SSA, travaillent sur les aspects stratégie, schéma directeur, tout ce qui est planification. Donc là, on est plus en amont, mais c'est quand même les éléments de confort qui permet ensuite de travailler sur des projets concrets. Donc Donc, quand on a une planification, des plans d'occupation des sols, on a décidé que c'était une ceinture verte avec du maraîchage, que vous avez protégé vos maraîchages, que vous voulez développer des projets plutôt dans la filière agricole, sur l'approvisionnement alimentaire de la ville de Dakar, parce que vous êtes un maillon important pour nourrir la ville, et il faut que cette ceinture maraîchère continue d'exister. Là, on est vraiment sur de la stratégie du territoire, on est sur les enjeux du territoire. Et c'est vraiment important que du coup, vous soyez aidés sur les outils de planification, les outils tels que les schémas directeurs d'aménagement et d'urbanisme, les plans d'occupation des sols. On est plutôt, je crois, sur cet enjeu-là. Maintenant, vous mentionnez des sujets, des grands projets de logement et tout ce qui a trait à l'atténuation. Il y a tellement de facilités de préparation. C'est une forêt de facilités de préparation chez tous les bailleurs. Nous-mêmes, on en a plusieurs. Il y en a une sur le logement. S'il y a des besoins pour travailler sur des projets de logement dans les villes, notamment des projets qui font très attention à leur bilan carbone, aux matériaux utilisés, à la consommation énergétique, là aussi, il y a des outils pour aider les villes à travailler là-dessus. Voilà. Il y avait beaucoup de questions, je peux pas répondre peut-être à plus, mais j'essaye. Je ne connais pas de cas particulier, donc c'est difficile.
Thank you so much. I am getting waved down by the translators, so what I'm going to do is so that you can pose one very short question. We're then going to go, I'll wrap up, and we're going to go into a tea break. So I'm sure if you do have any questions for our speakers, you do have a few minutes to ask them some questions during the tea break before they rush on to the next sessions. So if you can pose your question relatively quickly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pete. I'm just going to let you the time to wrap up. Not mine. So I am Mr. Sembe. I'm the mayor of Toutefois, which is in the region of Dakar, but I am posted in the east part of Toutefois. So I'm going to ask a very short question, as you mentioned, because I heard Mr. Lefebvre talk about access to technical assistance in terms of preparation of project. So my question is the following: to let us know if we have some requirements, some criteria, some minimum criteria which are required. So what are they for local governments to have access to funds in terms of the system, the technical assistance? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. So your answer also.
Short question, short answer. Tous les fonds de préparation sont accessibles, on a de l'information sur Internet, sur tous ces fonds de préparation. Il suffit de connaître le nom et puis ensuite d'aller chercher l'information. Et ensuite, vous avez des critères qui sont décrits sur les pages web des fonds de préparation. Donc, il y a énormément de fonds de préparation, il suffit un petit peu de les connaître et ensuite d'accéder aux personnes contacts chez CoM SSA, Covenant of Mayors of Sub-Saharan Africa, chez Secretariat ou chez tout un tas d'autres, le réseau qui est le parapluie pour tous ces fonds de préparation, c'est le CCFLA. Donc c'est Cities, Climate, c'est un acronyme anglais, c'est sur tous les fonds de préparation sont en général, l'information est disponible sur le site du CCFLA. Pour tout un tas de fonds de préparation, sur tout un tas de thématiques différentes. Et là, c'est là où vous avez un rassemblement d'informations. Je ne vais pas donner les critères de Secretariat aujourd'hui, je ne pense pas que ce soit intéressant, mais vous avez cette information pour les autres.
Thank you so much. And I think that ends on a really great note, and I'm not going to end with a summary, I'm actually going to end with an urge to all of you, and that is to utilize the initiatives and the facilities that are available to Sub-Saharan Africa. I think we know that there's a lot of great initiatives, such as CoM SSA, that is leading, and probably one of the biggest initiatives on the continent around getting cities from that stage of undertaking their risk and vulnerability assessments all the way to actually developing activities and then taking those activities and developing them into project concepts. There's facilities such as the Gap Fund, such as Secretariat. There's the TAP initiative, and these are all initiatives and facilities that are available to cities. So I urge you to utilize them. And I think, and I know from CoM SSA is, we host the technical help desk, and there's so many services that are available to cities, yet we're not seeing a huge number of the cities that are sitting in this room utilizing, for example, the technical help desk. We're seeing the same cities utilizing the technical help desk. So my urge is to you is to, for example, become a signatory of CoM SSA and utilize the technical help desk and the partners that CoM SSA has. So that is my urge to end on today.